Well, it's March 22nd, and we're out here right at that time where the buds are going to start popping, leaves, leaf out, and a great time to still cut deer bedding areas. And we're starting in this food plot right here. This is where Diane shot 2 of her bucks out of this redneck blind right up here. You can see. So what we're doing, it was already a great spot. She literally shot the deer standing right here, both of them. They were standing right down in this spot. We have an apple tree, so pretty cool. So it's already a great spot, but we can make it better. And it's not only that we can make it better, but we can actually make this location better, which makes the next location. We're just continually linking these together. Now, when we came in here and hunted and planned last year and buying this new property, we linked everything together that we could based on food, based on natural lay of the land, and how we could access without spooking deer, because that's critical. When we get in the inside of this food plot right here, this strip, this is a hunting plot, a true hunting plot. We want the deer to travel left and right in front of the blind. We can access, we have switchgrass planted out there, switchgrass planted on this inside layer of this food plot. And I want deer to stack up next to this food plot. I want them to, we can count on them bedding right next to this food plot. And as you know, I talk about that all the time. We talk about bedding layering. And with that bedding layering, with the food right here, we expect to hold a doe family group down here, some does and fawns. And if that takes place right next to this food, then we can count on those bucks being out to the side. And of course, we have a stand that way. We're going to add a stand this way right here, so we can watch the movement going back and forth to this doe bedding area. And so I'm going to go through the steps of what we did with the type of timber we have and why we cut. And again, there's just so many different ways to create bedding areas based on your particular timber. I'm fortunate because I have a lot of junk timber. We have some ash, some soft maple, a little bit of hard maple, a lot of aspen, some cherry, various oak. We cut down some junk oak too. But I'm going to go through why I cut where and what I did. And we went through 1 tank of chainsaw gas, just 1 tank in the chainsaw, and we've accomplished a lot. So this is a 3rd location that I've worked on. It only takes a little over an hour to cut through a tank of gas, and we're going to skip around. I would imagine this year my goal is to cut about 15 of these areas. And once leaf out takes place, I'm going to stop cutting, but then I'm going to start back in August. So whatever I don't get done over the next 2 or 3 weeks before my next client trip in Michigan, then I'll pick that back up in late July, August, when their trees are entering that summer dormancy, a lot of energies down in the roots. Great time to cut. We don't want to cut at leaf out when all that energy is transferring to the tips, and we're cutting it off down at the bottom. I want to get maximum regeneration. So this bedding area isn't just a random spot. We're actually, most of our food plots where we're not going to go into the woods past this food plot, blow our scent into the food plot and spook deer that are traveling through here. We get a lot of buck movement deer through here during the daylight. But I want to put that bedding area there. That's not an area we're going to hunt. We will not spook deer in there. In fact, we have switchgrass right here along the food plot. Again, on the entrance, we have switchgrass. So we're going to make it so we can get up and down that blind without ever spooking deer. And it was already a good spot to begin with. But we're placing that bedding area there because it complements this food plot. It stacks does and fawns there. And then it helps set up this entire movement that we have. We have another larger food plot over here that we're expanding. Another food plot past that. We have a switchgrass field. We have water holes. And this entire top movement right here, we're going to enhance. And this is step 1 in this location. Let's go in here and check out some of the trees and why we cut what we did where. And I hope it makes a lot of sense to you. You can actually see some of the logs back there laying, you know, in that location. We're not cutting right up here on this edge. We have a lot of apple trees, and I want to put those deer 30, 40, 50 yards back as opposed to right on this edge in thick cover where we might spook the deer. It's already a really thick edge here, so when we get into that blind, we're not going to spook anything if it's 30, 40 yards in, let alone compared to if those deer were bedding right here on this edge. So let's go take a look. So what we have here is some really good bedding on this upper bench before it tapers off into the steep hillside and then the draw below. And so I started with, we had a few oaks out here on this edge. We're dropping those first and then working backwards. And so if I want to build this bedding area right here, most of the trees are leaning into the hillside and trying to get sun. So pretty easy to drop those lower trees first and then come back. So what we focused on is dropping those large mature trees first. Those are the ones that are going to come down easy. We can see which way they're leaning. And then we work backwards. What I've done is, you can see a giant mess right here that's going to be full of poplar regeneration. Pretty easy for deer to step over these logs. And you can see with the aspen that we've cut, we're doing a full cut right here. So we're putting a face cut on it and then making sure we can drop that tree, get it to go where we want to. And then the actual regeneration off this aspen stump is not going to take place on the stump. It's going to take place from the lateral root system that establishes and spread out. So a lot different than some of the basswood or soft maple that we're cutting, where they're going to regenerate off the side of the log, and you can get away with hinge cutting those a lot more. You can hinge cut a popple or aspen, but why? You want that lateral root regeneration. I was out shed hunting here the other day and I saw a grouse in this location. So we're going to get lots of stems per acre. You get about 7,000 shoots per acre with aspen. And so that's not only going to help deer, it's deer food, it's deer cover. It's one of the most important northern species. Count yourself lucky if you have it on your property. But it's also great cover for rabbits and grouse too, and other small critters. So we're improving this area for deer, but I talk about deer all the time, be in the middle of the bullseye. If you hit your edge cover, your diversity on your habitat, then you're going to incorporate a lot of other wildlife species. So you see a big pile right here. This is the main movement right through here. We have a trail system right here behind Dylan. Deer travel through here, and if you can come over here, I'm on a deer trail right here. So we've kept this movement similar. And then you can see the bedding opportunity down on these lower benches right here. So when we create this type of cutting, we actually have cuttings over here too. This allows those deer to take their natural movement through here, and then they can cut down and they could go between these cuttings and bed. So they can bed right here, they can bed down in between. So we're not actually making deer beds. That's kind of a fallacy. What we're doing is making a deer bedding area. That's what you want to focus on. This took us a little bit over an hour, and we have areas that'll regenerate. We have areas that are trapping browse. We're going to add red cedars to this. So now this is open to the entire afternoon southwest, west location. We get a lot of sun in here, and this is the perfect time to come in here and add red cedars in little pockets through here. In this area, 1 tank of gas, I would add anywhere from 30 to 50 red cedars. I'd cluster those in groups of 2 to 5. So you have 2 to 5 over here, spaced about 4 feet apart. And what I like is, especially with those aspen tops, where they're not going to regenerate, they're regenerating out of the lateral root system, then I can go ahead and stab those red cedar back in there if I wanted to add white pine in this area. That's typically browsed down a lot higher than red cedar. Red cedar's hardly ever browsed on, rubbed on. They'll break them in half. But I want to add those cedars back here, diversify the cover. There'll always be screening here going forward. It'll get full sunlight at this time, and it'll be protected by that top of the aspen. So we focused on cutting a lot of the larger mature trees first. We saved some of the big, beautiful oaks that are in here, or potentially good oaks. We have some white oaks behind Dylan over here. And now the deer can go in and out between these cuttings. The cuttings that we have right over here, major cutting here. On the other side, they can still move through here. In fact, Dylan's standing right on the trail. It just goes in an angle through here. And then you can see all these really nice benches where deer are already bedding. We can see the rock down here. So even when we get off to the side over here, you can see how this was a deer bed during the wintertime. It's flattened out. We have the rock over there. There's actually a deer bed right on the high side of the rock. And so even these areas right here, even though we're not cutting directly around this deer bed, now we're giving the deer an incredible amount of browse over here, making the cover thicker, obviously adding the red cedar. But what they're really benefiting from is the regeneration from all the sunlight hitting here. The diversity will come in, the high stem count, and that makes it so a deer bed like this, you can see the hair down in here, but it makes a deer bed like this a lot more valuable because we have the heavy cuttings over here. We have the hillside going up this. And as you can see on the top of a lot of these trees where it flattens out, there's another deer bed. And so a lot of deer beds going downhill in between our cuttings. And again, we started with the major timber first, getting those big mature trees down on the ground. And then we were focusing on the smaller trees, working our way backwards in the cuttings. We're constantly dropping trees I like to cluster them. In the other cutting, I had about 3 main cutting areas, where this area is 2. We have 1 high, a couple low, staggered, so deer can go in between the cuttings. You don't mind if there's brush piles like that take up a small area, where it's taking up the size of a garage, where deer can move around, they can browse around it, they can bed within, off to the side, wherever they want. So you're giving a higher value to this area. And then what we're doing lastly is, if we see opportunity where we have maple, shagbark hickory, ash, basswood, then we can hinge cut those smaller trees. And we're able to hinge cut a couple basswood. Those basswood we can hinge up to 6-8 inches. Ash too. Box elder in one of the other areas, we had some really good box elder that were up to 12 inches diameter, and you can hinge cut those. They just slowly come right down to the ground. And again, a prolific amount of browse in those areas. So we're working on the big stuff first, making sure it's open around those, working on little pockets, getting that on the ground. We're taking out some of the junk oak. So we're identifying, not every oak is a good oak. So we're identifying the good mass producers, the potential mass producers, potential future dominant trees. We're taking out the leaners, the subordinates in between, so that we can give more life and more acorn production to those adjacent, mature, dominant, really good oaks. Those are the ones a lot of times a logger would take in here. We have some really good logs, but those are also our good mass producers. And on a wildlife property like this, I want to keep those good mass producers in here. They're just an addition to the browse that's already coming in. Think about it this way. This location with this browse, with the adjacent food that we have and that we're offering on this property, the deer were already mostly here during the winter throughout the property off and on. In fact, we found 16 sheds here this year. We found 6 in our cornfield over at the house. So the deer are in this area. Browse is what they need during the winter time. Acorns are great, but they're more of just a seasonal, a couple months here or there where those acorns are dropping. The browse and the regeneration from the hardwood, from the aspen shoots, ash, maple, whatever it is, deer have that browse that they can feed on, not only during the winter, but also October, November, December, all the way through January, February, March. They're eating that browse. And so now we have that perfect combination where we have the hunting plot up there. We have some good elevation changing here, obviously, too. We've tried to complement the current existing movement, and then deer can escape downhill or uphill going right between our cuttings. So we're not blocking them off in any way. It's a highway going along the cuttings. They can go back and forth through it. And if this was flat ground, we'd be doing the same thing. We just don't have that elevation change. And a lot of times you're cutting more to the southerly sky to get some more sunlight into it. We're gonna have no problem getting a lot of sunlight in here. And that's the final point. We're cutting the big timber first. We're moving backwards as we cut, dropping trees. We're clustering it. We're adding those conifers. We're hinge cutting to add more horizontal cover and food off that log. And then finally make sure that if you are cutting, there's always sunlight involved, always sunlight coming down. And you can kind of see, this is pretty cool. You know, I don't mind when we're out here, we can scout as long as it's within 3-4 weeks before the season begins. And then after the season, I'm out here all year long, outside of that hunting time. So it's kind of cool to get back in here. This is an area right here where I'd never been to. So to get in here and explore during this off season, I took about a 2-hour walk looking for sheds yesterday and getting to know the land. But you can kind of imagine, this is pretty cool. This goes back over to our cuttings. You can see the hillside right here going up this way. And you can just imagine this little corridor right here where deer are coming in between the rocks. And then yet another bedding area right here. You can see some of the hair down here, down the bottom. So that deer was bedding here during the winter. Often probably, right in this location. But there's scattered beds right there above that rock. There's scattered beds throughout this area. I want to place those does closer to the food source, those bucks as we go this way. And then we have another great stand location right over here around the corner, that this bedding area and the bedding area that we're going to create on the point past that stand location further help strengthen this movement up on this top shelf and gives us a variety of stand locations, whether over food or over cruising corridors between bedding areas, all along this top shelf. We don't care if those bucks are down in that bottom because they got to come out to feed. And we're putting them in this line right up here with water holes, mock scrapes, food sources, in between bedding areas. We're putting it together even more this year. Can't wait to bring it to you this fall. I know we have some good movement through here. It's going to enhance Diane's blind right over here on the small food plot. And you can bet these stands on either side. It'll help strengthen this movement and give us even more opportunity to maybe even run into Venti this year. That's what we're hoping, or one of the other mature bucks that we have on the property. That's how we're creating bedding areas in this location. In your location, if it's all mature timber, all hardwoods, you might want to get a logger out there to capture some of that value, but get the sunlight open to the ground. Make sure there's a lot of regeneration. If you have pole timber, you might have to do a lot of work with hinge cutting. Hinge cutting is more work than dropping some of these big trees. Always stay safe, always have some eye protection, helmet, chaps on, and make sure you're always looking up, looking for vines that are attached to the tree that could swing a log around or keep it from falling, pull another tree over on top of you, something that's dead. Always look for those widow makers up above, and you'll have a safe cut. We're out here, we cut through 1 tank of gas. That's good enough right now. I've cut up to 5 and 6 tanks on client properties in the past, and I'm not in that kind of shape. So we have a lot of videos to shoot. This was one of them. We got some cutting done today, a little switchgrass seeding, and we'll be on to the next project. There's always something to do. Hope you enjoy making bedding areas this year in your woods, doing it right and doing it safely. Hey guys, I really appreciate you watching today's video. We're out here having some fun today. We're planting some switchgrass, cutting some timber, making some bedding areas, but most importantly, we're putting it all together, and that's critical. Any habitat improvements that you're making, you can't just make improvements because it's a good spot. You have to link those together so that helps your hunt this fall. Really, I encourage you to check out my web classes. The link is in the description. It's helped a lot of folks design their properties and do what we're out here having fun doing right now.